trust me when I say this, that what's best lies on the other side of truth. Whatever that is, that's what's best for you. That's in alignment with the universal order or purpose. What up, Casanova? So in this video, I want to talk about this idea of radical honesty, of living a life that is radically honest. And it's important to use the word radical here, okay? Not just say a life of honesty or a life of authenticity, right? I could choose to phrase it that way, but the importance of saying radical here is to emphasize that it needs to be truly fucking honest to its core, okay? And I will make the distinction between honesty versus transparency, radical honesty versus radical transparency, because it is not the same thing. The importance of the word radical is to suggest that it does need to be truly fucking honest with yourself and with others in order to live a life on your terms, which is the only way to live if you want to live in alignment, as we talk about. If you want to live in alignment with yourself and the universe, okay, is to get closer and closer and closer to truth, to your truth and to universal truth. And technically, they should align. I always say you have to start off by following your truth, even if it's somewhat out of alignment with the universal truth, with the universal virtuous way of living, as the Stoics call it, that is, temperate, courageous, just, and wise. Okay, it might sometimes fall out of alignment, but it's some starting point. It's some starting point that can then help you calibrate and get you closer and closer to full alignment so that you can swim along the current of life. But if you're not even following some inklings of your own truth, then you'll never get to a place of alignment, right? If you're already lying to yourself, if you're saying, I want to go out there and learn how to get better with women, I want to live a life on my terms, I want to, become a professional surfer, and you're not pursuing that, then you'll never get to the full truth, okay? Because you're not even starting. The universe, your heart, the universe, whatever, it's showing you some path towards that, and if you need to follow that. When we talk about alignment, your thoughts, actions, and words and feelings have to be in alignment. You have to follow your truth. And as you go along, you learn how to act, as I say, from a place of love versus fear, more and more. This starts with determining your truth, right? Determining your truth, figuring yourself out, and that's why I talk about all these motivations and fear versus love, pain towards pain, away from pleasure, passion versus circumstance. You need to, do these audits to determine your truth, right? And it doesn't have to be that complex in the beginning. You have to at least start with I feel this is right. I want to do this and act on that and kind of calibrate over time. So you do this by examining your ego, by confronting your own beliefs, by learning, by trying, by exercising courage, right? Courage, one of the 4 cardinal virtues. You start somewhere, you follow, you confront, you overcome, you learn, you try, you put yourself on the line, you determine your truth, you have honest conversations with yourself, you try to catch the bullshit. And some of this takes perspective, an outsider's opinion, a third-party perspective, right? Unbiased guidance, or it's always maybe a little bit of bias, but as unbiased as it can get. At least when you're talking to a third party, they're not going to be as biased. So you got to determine your truth. Okay, that's a big part of radical honesty. You got to speak your truth. So you determine your truth, and you keep determining your truth, and you keep determining your truth, and you got to speak your truth, and you got to keep speaking your truth, and keep speaking your truth, and keep fucking speaking your truth. And sometimes it's scary to speak your truth. It's scary to speak the truth. And we avoid it because we want to avoid some kind of a situation, some kind of an outcome. But the reality is that we don't truly know that those outcomes are what's best. Those outcomes that we're trying to avoid out of fear are what's best for us. What if those outcomes are not actually what's best for us? What if whatever happens at the end of speaking our truth is what's actually best for us and not the avoidance of that? Why do we think, right, we're always telling ourselves a story, right? And that's part of determining your truth, determining the ego is spinning certain narratives, right, due to conditioning. Why do we think that we know what's best? Trust me when I say this, that what's best lies on the other side of truth. Whatever that is, that's what's best for you. That's in alignment with the universal order or purpose. So speaking your truth, okay, on a macro level, on a micro level, okay, day to day, small things sometimes, but especially big things, okay. Next, acting your truth. Acting your fucking truth. You determine it, you speak it, you act it. You act in alignment with what you think is right. Even if down the road you tweak that a bit, you tweak that truth. You realize, you know what? Some of it was for the wrong reasons, but it got me there. It got me to the next level. Like I said, this can be macro, this can be micro. This can have to do with authenticity and comfort in work, lifestyle, relationships, and day to day. And I always say that the best way, to follow and speak and act your truth is to come more from a place of practical versus principled. Okay, and this is what's going to help you stay calibrated and reasonable. Okay, and what do I mean by that? Practical versus principled. There is a difference between acting from a place of this is important to me on a practical level in order to live my truth versus I'm going to make a point out of it. Out of principle, I'm going to make a point out of it. That is not coming from a good place. That's coming from a place of fear, of having to prove something. Okay, now it can get quite nuanced, and sometimes there's overlap, but really you want to stick to the practical. Is this important to me on a micro level, on a macro level? Is this important for me to live my authentic life, right? And that's going to help you be more balanced, and it's going to help you it's going to help you compromise. In some situations, you might want to compromise. In some situations, you might want to let certain things go and not act out of principle because you recognize that making a fuss out of it might cause a bigger problem. So sometimes we have to pick our battles.
Hey, what up? It's me again. Just having a cocktail here, but I wanted to quickly interrupt to, one, make sure you're paying attention, and two, to let you know that everything you're learning here is directly and indirectly related to building your dream dating life. And just overall a life that is healthy, win-win, and on your terms. Now, when you're done the video, I recommend you take a few minutes to go to the link below where you can watch a very entertaining and informative video on what steps you need to take to begin your very own transformation. If you're up for it, that is. I guess you first need to ask yourself, and pardon my French here, but do you want to fuck lots of hot poon, or do you want to fuck lots of hot? As well as find love, discover the meaning of life, and become a self-developed, self-respecting man. Okay, end of pep talk. Back to the video. Go check out the link below when you're done, or I will personally call your mother and have her force you.
Right? And when we're practical about things, we understand what's most important for our truth. If you go in there to a place and your coffee's not made the way you want to, sometimes you do want to send it back. Right? And you say, hey, I want my coffee made the way I want to. But sometimes you realize, you know what? This can become a whole fucking thing. I don't have the time. I don't know, the girl might get upset because she has a tendency to get upset, or maybe she's busy, it's gonna cause a thing, or maybe like she's already remade my coffee, and now if I have to ask her again, it's not worth it, or you're at a coffee shop. I had this not too long ago, and there was this couple, and the guy was just speaking so fucking loud. It's almost like he had no common decency and maybe not even the self-awareness, whatever it was, to recognize that he was disrupting people. And I really wanted to say something. I really wanted to be like, hey man, in a polite way, like, yo, can you keep it down? Like, this is very disruptive, it's very loud, da-da-da. But I was only there for 5 minutes, not even getting my coffee. 5 minutes maybe, long enough for it to bother me, but short enough for me to realize it's not worth me making a thing out of it, because he might push back and the girl at the front might get into it and it can become a whole thing. So I realized, you know what, if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna end up doing this, it might be out of principle, and I don't wanna do that, because on a practical level, I don't really need to fix this right now. I'm leaving. And someone might say, well, what about for all the others in the coffee shop? Well, it's not your job necessarily to be the savior, to fix the situation. That's up to other people, and that's up to the girl who's working at the coffee shop. And if they want to tolerate it, they can tolerate it. And if they can't help it, that's their fate. You gotta let people suffer sometimes. A therapist said that. You gotta let people suffer sometimes and not think you know what's best for them. They have their own path to go down. Understanding balance and compromise. Sometimes my dad asks me to dress nicer when I see him. And sometimes it feels unreasonable. Like, in order to see him, I need to dress a certain way. I need to look presentable. And I've pushed back in the past about this, but then you realize, is it really worth pushing back on something that's not that significant out of principle? Especially if it's something so important to him. That's another point. Sometimes, we need to learn how to weigh out what is important, to what extent something is important to someone versus to what extent it is detrimental to us, right? And that's a good system, how to weigh this out, to know to what extent am I bending, am I compromising my truth in order to serve others, right? So balance and compromise is important. So acting from a practical place versus from a principled place is very useful. And lastly, I want to say that there is a difference between radical honesty versus radical transparency. Radical honesty has to do with speaking your truth on a practical level, determining, speaking, and acting your truth in a way that helps you live your authentic life, a life that doesn't compromise anything unnecessarily. Transparency, on the other hand, can sometimes be unnecessary volunteering of information that is not always appropriate or conducive, and sometimes, in fact, can be detrimental, okay? It can be detrimental. In certain situations, you don't want to volunteer some information because it doesn't necessarily serve you or the other person or the situation, and it can be more detrimental than conducive. So there is the difference between radical honesty versus radical transparency. What are some examples of radical honesty on a micro level and a macro level? Micro level, sending your coffee back. We just discussed this. Right? Sending your coffee back if it's not done the way you want, or your food back at the restaurant, if it came out and it's not the way you want. If you're not going to enjoy your meal, why pay for it? If there's something bothering you at work, with the management style, with the environment, whatever it is that's preventing you from doing your job, or maybe it's just not true to who you are, making you act in a way that's out of alignment, you have to bring that up. Right? Or maybe you're not getting paid as much as you think you deserve. You bring that up. Relationship problems, things that you want changed in your relationship with your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, okay, with your partner, right? You don't bring that up, you're gonna suffer. They're gonna suffer. Everyone's gonna suffer. You gotta bring that up. You gotta work through these things. Biggest reason that people don't have successful relationships is they don't communicate their truth. They don't. Out of fear of losing, offending, etc. Sometimes they don't even have a good enough, I'm oversimplifying, they don't have a good enough compass of boundaries and expectations. Their self-esteem is broken and all that. But ultimately, they're not determining their truth. They're not speaking their truth. They're not acting their truth. Try to identify situations on a day-to-day level, on a week-to-week level, on a micro and a macro level. Try to be attuned to that. Am I holding back when something is important to me and I've weighed it out? Okay? And be careful. Be careful. There is a trap. I say sometimes it's not worth it because it becomes a thing. Sometimes, in order to get better at something and to learn how to be better at compromising and being balanced and differentiating between practical versus principled, is you have to just learn to exercise this muscle over and over and over to then realize, you know what, maybe this wasn't worth it. Because often people who don't know how to speak their and act their truth, how to assert themselves, etc., they often rationalize, you know what, it's not worth it. You know what, I don't really care enough, when you do in fact care enough. And this is where self-esteem, plays a role, because they don't think they deserve that, right? They have that right. How could I ask for You know, why should I ask for a better lamp at my work, for better lighting, for a more comfortable chair? You know, who am I to ask for a better fucking chair? Who am I to ask for a higher wage? When in fact, you know, you might actually be doing a good job. If in your heart you don't believe, you know, you feel like you're being exploited, or you feel like you need a better lamp to do a better job, you got to act on that. Act on that. Be careful when you try to rationalize. I think once you put things into perspective, it becomes quite obvious what is important enough for you, right? And be careful to use conflict, avoidance of conflict, as a way of arguing that something is not in fact worth fighting for or pursuing or speaking out against. If you don't have a good gauge on this, okay, it is better that you just start exercising. My recommendation, you just start exercising radical honesty as often as you can until you become better calibrated, as opposed to holding back. That's an important caveat. So for example, these days, maybe in a certain conversation, well, let's say it's political or it's something, and you know, I'm in a situation where I'm there and I might disagree. I might not care to disagree because I might realize, you know what, this doesn't necessarily affect me. And if it does affect me, or maybe me and my partner, or somehow affects me, my family, my girlfriend, my work, whatever, somehow, then I might speak my truth. But if I realize, you know what, this doesn't really affect me, I don't need to go out of my way to disagree and speak my truth, then I might just hold back. What's the point? Okay, so I can tell the difference. But for others, they might not be able to tell the difference and realize to what degree this actually affects them. Okay, and sometimes holding back in and of itself affects you overall. Okay, holding back on speaking your truth affects you overall. So again, I say exercise this as much as possible until you develop more and more and more, and then you can start holding back and being better at compromising and differentiating between practical versus principled. Okay, there's a book called Radical Honesty. You can check that out. There is also a book called The Assertiveness Workbook. You can check that out. It teaches you how to be assertive, how to assert your truth onto the world. This is absolutely key for you to live your truth, a life on your terms, that you can be more in alignment and be happier or content.
All right, man. Thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying this content and that it really helps you make some moves in the right direction. Sincerely, because everything I teach, I have lived and breathed and contemplated ad nauseum. Unlike a bunch of these cookie cutter life coach clowns out there that regurgitate some shit they read in a book and call themselves experts. With that in mind, if you want to go deeper, if you want to really know what it takes to become the kind of guy that can confidently attract and manage relationships with quality women on your terms and in a way that is healthy and honest, no scummy or gimmicky shit here. And if you generally want to live a life of truth, freedom, love, courage, and adventure, then as Tom Cruise famously said in Jerry Maguire, help me help you, and go click the link below. There's a very entertaining and informative video that will shed some light on how you can get started. Do it, or you will forever perish into the dark abyss. But seriously, go check it out. Let's kickstart this journey of personal development together and help you reinvent yourself into a sex god.